The curtains were blue. You may have seen this meme floating around years ago. It may have even been a decade before this video was created. The way it goes typically is you're in a class, the teacher reads that the curtains were blue in the book, and they interpret this to mean that the curtains symbolize them falling into depression or their emotional state or the state of their life or whatever. And then the author says the curtains were fucking blue. The point of it, obviously, with the emphasis added there, being that sometimes your literary analysis that you're so proud of, that you go so deep into, that you spend so much time working on and trying to assemble all of this meaning from little details, sometimes it's just wrong. Sometimes the curtains really are just blue, and there's really not anything else to it. Unfortunately, this has been picked up by a whole bunch of people for the past several years and turned into some sort of bizarre accusation of lack of critical thinking, even a thought-terminating cliche. Some people just say that capitalism ruins literature because people think that. I haven't even bothered watching those videos because that assertion is too stupid for me to even bother with. What really inspired me to make this video was watching a video by one of these intrepid personalities. I won't say which, it doesn't really matter. But they go into this discussion about how critical thinking is important and how things like the curtains were blue is used to avoid critical thinking. The example that they invoke is a politician's speech. Now, funny enough, if you pay attention to the political things that they bring up as examples, it's Rupert Murdoch or other right-wing figures. For some reason, this person never points to any left-wing speech that's a problem. It's only right-wing speech that's a problem. And they talk about how you can be propagandized by not thinking critically. A politician's speeches are put together very carefully. The words, word order, everything is chosen with extreme care to make the listener hear and thus think what they want them to think. In other words, a politician's speeches are basically designed to convince you to think a certain way. Any kind of anything meant to persuade someone, that's how it works. That's what persuasion is. And you can call it propaganda if you want, although for some reason it's only propaganda if you disagree with it now. But the bottom line is that's just persuasion, and that's how it works. Here's the irony in the curtains were blue, and these kinds of examples, these assertions that critical thinking is just being flat out stopped by saying, no, actually the curtains are just blue and your analysis is stupid. The irony is that these people, these literate masters, these people who would gladly run around in the YouTube comments all day long, accusing you of lacking reading comprehension, accusing you of not being able to do any sort of literary analysis, cannot understand why the curtains were fucking blue is a thing that might actually be valid. Because the ultimate irony is that the people who take this and attempt to shoot it down perform their own thought-terminating cliches in doing so. The curtains were fucking blue, ostensibly is coming from the author. And the meaning of what the author says, it kind of dies once it leaves the author's hands. This is a concept we refer to as death of the author. The author writes something, but the value in it to you is what you get out of reading it. That's death of the author in a nutshell. However, the curtains were blue is the worst possible example that any of these people could use to try and attack. Because they'll take you on this long meandering discussion about how politicians can propagandize you using words, but they won't consider for one moment, no, wait a minute, what validity could exist in the curtains were blue? The curtains were just blue. The curtains were fucking blue. There's nothing else to it. The curtains were blue. How does this have any actual value? What could this potentially mean and be correct? But they don't think that far. They see this, they go, I can use this to show why I'm so smart. I can use this to demonstrate that capitalism is bad, right-wingers are bad, that people don't think critically anymore if they don't believe what I want them to believe. Of course, isn't it funny how that works? But they don't think beyond that and realize that they're actually shooting themselves in the foot with a shotgun that they spent a lot of time meticulously crafting on their own. The curtains were blue means the curtains were blue because what you're thinking, what you're doing, when you dig in real deep and you try to extract some sort of big, bold meaning out of some small nugget, sometimes that is invalid. Sometimes you actually are wrong. Now, in fiction, maybe not so much. Maybe it doesn't matter as much. I mean, if you're analyzing fiction, it's fiction. It's not even real. But in anything beyond fiction, it matters. And honestly, even in fiction to some extent, it matters that sometimes the curtains were just blue. Because maybe the guy just likes blue. Maybe all it is showing you that the guy has an affinity for blue. Therefore, later, the guy will, make some sort of selection where he's biased towards blue. Maybe that's all there is to it. Maybe it is as simple as foreshadowing to some extent. Laying down a little foundation that later on will actually have an effect. There, Chekhov's gunning the blue, but not necessarily the curtain. Maybe it is just a color preference. But if you go deep into this literary analysis of, let's psychoanalyze this character based on the color of these curtains and the fact that there are curtains that exist, maybe that's not true. In fact, when it comes to nonfiction, it almost certainly is not true. And this is why when these people conflate real-world things with fiction, everything goes off the rails and doesn't make a lot of sense. They're not actually thinking about why they might not be correct in their analysis. See, there's no value in analyzing something if you don't have some way of determining that you're wrong about your analysis. What is the value of looking at something and trying to extract deeper meaning if there's absolutely no way to prove that your deeper meaning may be wrong? If there's no counter, if there's no pushback, if there's nothing to show that, hey, this conclusion I came to is false. See, and this is the ultimate problem with a whole lot of so-called literary analysis. A lot of it really does just come down to, well, I have thoughts in my head, and I'm reading this page, and here's a thing on this page, and I'm taking the thoughts in my head and mapping them to the things on this page because humans are pattern recognition machines, and they spit things out based on pattern recognition. So I'm just spitting out my pattern recognition based on this thing. There might be some value in that, but the value is only in seeing what patterns you recognize, in seeing the associations that you've already got predetermined into your head. In a way, it determines more what might be wrong or what you might be blinded to or what your biases are personally than it does anything about the actual literature. It says more about you than it says about the book that you're trying to extrapolate deep psychological meaning out of blue curtains from. It's really kind of crazy. I mean, look, this guy in this video reads 1984. If you've seen it, now you know who it is. But he reads 1984, the first paragraph or so. He goes over it, and he's like, he walks in, and this dirt comes in with him. And he says, well, that means that the guy, and he does the curtains were blue thing seriously. He actually triggers the curtains were blue response from me, because he walks in, and the dirt comes in with him. Well, you say that the dirt comes in with him means that he's dirt. He feels like dirt. But that's not what I get out of it at all. What I get out of it is he comes in and the people who wrote the book are painting a scene for me to think about happening. I don't get that the guy is dirt. I get that the dirt came in with the guy. I can see this sort of tracking in of dirt. It might speak to some personality stuff, but this direct mapping of meaning, the dirt comes in with him. Notice they didn't say that, the dirt was there, that the dirt came in with him. It's not alive, okay? The dirt didn't literally come in with him. And you would think that I was stupid if I was like, oh, so the dirt walked in right beside him? Hey, dirt. Hey, how you doing? You my buddy. No, you would think I was a lunatic. You'd think that that was the dumbest analysis you've ever heard. But somehow the correct analysis for that is, the dirt came in with him means that he also feels like dirt. No, why don't you look a little bit further? Maybe the dirt enters the residence at the same time as the person, Because it's dirty outside and it implies he's bringing the dirt in, doesn't mean that he thinks anything about himself in particular. We haven't really learned anything about the guy yet. And this doesn't necessarily tell us about the guy. But these are the same kind of people who will gladly go online, go in forums, screech at you for hours on end, or just go to Reddit in a little hug box, Blue Sky, whatever, and for hours on end talk about how, oh, this one thing, this one little nuanced tiny detail means all this stuff. We spent most of the 2010s watching social justice warrior freaks go on the internet and take little things people said and blow them up into entire articles about how bad that person is and how racist they are secretly and they don't even know it. Just the most insane stuff you've ever heard of that doesn't actually make any sense. The dirt was not sentient. The dirt was not representative of the guy. The dirt was just there. It's part of the scene. You're trying to set the tone for the scene, but you're reading into it that it's the guy. You're insane. It's not the guy. It's obviously not the guy. And this is the problem. Your critical thinking terminated at, well, I've got to come up with this deeper meaning that somehow attaches to the guy that's doing the walking in. But sometimes it really is just that the dirt came in when he came in, that it's dirty and he brought in dirt. Maybe he's in a dirty place. Maybe, it's a dystopian place and therefore it's not very clean. And so the lack of cleanliness comes in on his feet. The same way that you would expect anywhere that's dirty to be like that. I don't understand how these people survive, because if you try to read deeper meaning into things where there is no deeper meaning, it makes you a moron, and you can end up actually causing more problems than you solve. Now, it's 2025 when I'm making this. We've spent over 10 years with people doing this exact thing. Just think about that. Since the early 2010s, I won't pin a year, but the early 2010s, we've had a whole bunch of psychopathic lunatics running around screeching that everything that they've said is effectively the analysis of the curtains were blue. It is the full society being the curtains were blue analyzed. And people like me tried to tell them, no, the curtains are just blue. There is nothing else to it. You're making shit up. Stop making shit up. And then when you tell them that truth, they go, oh, you're lying. You're just not willing to hear the truth. You're shut down, you're shut off, cut off, whatever, from actually understanding the reality. But you know what? If I stub my toe on a rock, there's not some deeper meaning in that. My toe is injured, the rock is hard and in front of me, and if I walk forward again, no matter what my interpretation is, I'm still, going to hit my foot on the rock again, and it's going to hurt again, and my foot might be even worse off than before. And no amount of me analyzing this toe stubbing on rock situation is going to make it any better. It's not going to just become something where, oh, I can interpret this in all kinds of, this is an allegory for da-da-da-da-da-da. But at the end of the day, what did it mean? It meant that I probably should have watched where I stepped, but it also meant, ow, that hurt. And rocks are hard, and that's just the way it is. If you can come up with some sort of deep meaning behind me stubbing my toe on a rock in some fiction book about me, you know what? Be my guest. But at the end of the day, your analysis of fiction is just as fictional as the fiction. It has just as much real-world value as the fiction. And it's fun to tell stories. And yes, stories can be used to persuade people of things. But at the end of the day, you too are telling a story. And if you go crazy in your analysis, if you don't keep it grounded in some way, shape, or form, if you try to tie things together, come up with elaborate extrapolations, the problem is, at some point, you're going to overanalyze, see things that aren't there. You might even develop tunnel vision. There are all these other problems that you start to invoke whenever you just get too deep into this. It really isn't always that deep. And that drives them insane. These people, if you tell them it's just not that deep, will accuse you of not having critical thinking skills, not having reading comprehension skills, not have blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, the real problem is it forces them to confront the fact that they may be wrong too. They may actually not know everything. They are not the smartest person in the room. These people are midwits. Look up midwit if you don't know what it is, but these people, they think they're smarter than they are. They feel pressured to look smart in front of other people, and that's why the curtains have to be complicated. That's why the curtains can never be blue. And that ultimately is the problem with the curtains were blue being wildly interpreted, and then someone shooting back about, oh, you know, the curtains weren't just blue. Because if the curtains aren't just blue, then they feel smart, then they feel validated, then they feel like they have some sort of value, they feel intellectual, they look cool to their friends. But at the end of the day, if the curtains don't have meaning, and they really are just blue, then what have they gained? What have you gained? What has anyone gained? No, all that's happened is they've wasted your time. They've wasted everyone's time with a bunch of crap that doesn't actually mean anything. And why did we go through all this effort? And there's no good reason for it. Stop wasting everyone's time with your bullshit. The curtains sometimes are just fucking blue. And that's the end of it. There is nothing more to it. And if you can't accept the fact that sometimes it really is just that the curtains are blue, then maybe you need to get off the internet and touch some grass, because you've been here far too long. You've sniffed your own farts way too much, and I think that your brain is deprived of oxygen. It's time to grow up, put on your big boy pants, and go outside and live life. Because if this is the thing that you can't handle, that sometimes it actually just is what it is and there's nothing else to it, you are a failure as an adult. Sorry. It's not my fault. You're the one who has to grow up. I suggest you put your pants on and do it, big boy. I've been meaning to make this video for a long time, but unfortunately, I've always just kind of thought of new things and gone in different directions with it, and I've always questioned myself, what about the death of the author? What about this whole big analysis thing? What do other people have to say about it? And when I went on YouTube and I searched "the curtains were blue," I found a bunch of bullshit. I'm making this video, imperfect as it may be, because bullshit needs to be combated. You must fight against bullshit, or it is de facto correct. That's just the way it is. Anyway, I hope that it's been valuable and educational and all that crap, but you know what? Leave all your nasty comments below, but if you insult me, I'm going to ban you. Don't waste your time. Have something constructive to say. Take it easy, and the curtains aren't blue, because there are no curtains. And that's just the way it is.